Hey, somebody needs to crank up their imagination. You have? Excellent. Good morning, afternoon, or evening. You are listening to The Professional Noticer. Hello, everyone. I'm Andy Andrews. Hey, thank you for making me a part of your week. My purpose here today and with every show we do is to play the part of a best friend or coach. I want to help you live the life of your wildest dreams by giving you access to the greatest mentors the world has to offer today. This week, The Professional Noticer is sponsored by WisdomHarbor.com. Here are a couple of quick questions. First question, how long has the public school system in your state been repeating the mantra, more money for education? And the second question, through the years, as they've gotten more money, how much has changed? Today, schools all over America are finding WisdomHarbor.com's one-of-a-kind streaming service to be the perfect low-cost, high-quality educational tool for their students, and such a relationship connector between parents and their young people, grandparents, and the young people for less than $3 a month per teacher, per person. Classrooms have access to original content only found on WisdomHarbor.com that teaches, entertains, and builds character in young people. Utilizing video, audio, and the written word, content is delivered in small bites by Grammy winners, CEOs, comedians, chefs, best-selling authors, and Hall of Fame speakers. There are even guitar lessons from an award-winning songwriter. Check it out today and join your friends and neighbors who are already a part of WisdomHarbor.com. And isn't it time your school system got involved? I think so. Observations and answers, that's what we do here on The Professional Noticer. And of course, we love it when somebody comes to the table with both. And I got to say, I'm very excited today. I'm a little bit nervous today. This is going to be a special show. I have an incredibly special guest who is very dear to me. I have no qualms in saying and I've told a lot of people this, she is the wisest woman I know. And I love her dearly. And you certainly know her. She is Gloria Gaither. And so, Gloria, hey, how are you doing?
Good morning. Good morning. Well, I don't know about that wisest woman thing. That don't give me anything I have to live up to.
Well, I've heard you. I've had so many conversations with you. I've heard you speak before. I've read what you've written. I've heard the songs you've been a part of, and I just I'm constantly moved. And I also, today we're going to talk poetry. All right. Now, I've got to say, before anybody tries to leap for the dial and turn this off, who is like a teenager or something, I just want you to listen. This is kind of how we're going to do it. Gloria is, now, ASCAP named her the songwriter of the century, not of the year, of the century, okay? And so when you look at that, now my theory is that there were poets back 100, 150 years ago, and people loved poetry, and they read books of poetry, and they listened to poetry, and they wrote poetry. Somewhere along the line, people kind of lost an interest in that, and it kind of got kind of a bad name or something, or kids started not liking it. And so I think that because today, where are the poets? Where's a book of poetry? But I think that our poets today are songwriters. I think that's where our poets are. And so if Gloria Gaither is songwriter of the century, she would be, if we were recognizing her as a poet, she would be poet laureate of the United States. And so I am not. But Gloria taught English. When Bill and Gloria met, they were teachers in high school. Gloria, what grades did you teach?
I taught juniors and seniors in high school in literature and French.
Okay. And did you teach like the college prep classes or the normal?
Yes. I had both. I had kids that were definitely college prep, and then kids that were just regular kids. And I loved those kids because I wanted to turn them on to the music of poetry. And those are the kids that came up for air in my poetry class. I'm saying we don't need more more poets, because there's lots of great poets out there now, you know, that are poet laureates. We need magical English teachers.
Wow. Well,
Because
you're
if there
we're,
are no readers or no listeners, then why, you know, why, as I wrote in a song about the prophets, why why be a poet if nobody reads it? You know, how what good are love songs if they don't make us lovers?
right. Well, for those of you watching today, just know you can choose who to relate to. You can choose to relate to our poet laureate, our great English teacher, literature teacher, or I will be playing the part of the 11th grade in the normal class. Uh,
Yeah,
okay,
that's
because
not quite fair, but
well, I've come to this late in my life. Because when I was that age, I didn't like it. I didn't like poetry. I didn't like having to memorize it. I didn't like having to read it. And somewhere along the line that changed. And I think everybody should know the impetus for this podcast is that I read a poem that I just thought was incredible. And it was called The Cremation of Sam McGee. And it's a funny thing, but it's written so well, and I was just so blown away. And so that went on Wisdom Harbor. And then Gloria texted me and said, I'm so glad you put Cremation of Sam McGee on Wisdom Harbor. And I was like, how do you know that? How do you know that? And so we talked, and Gloria said, oh, yeah, she said, tell me how you knew Robert Service.
Well, Stuart Hamlin was a big fan of Robert Service. And so he was also an English teacher, Stuart Hamlin, and one of the greatest lyricists I think, in Christian and country music. He was the Western country writer. And we taught Stuart Hamlin lyrics in our English class as Americana. So, you know, you don't get any better than Until Then and How Big Is God and The Tramp on the Street, Homeless and Weak Could Be I, But for the Grace of God, and all those incredible lyrics. And so we talk about what feeds us. We had this conversation with Stuart, and he said, I love Robert Service. So I did what you did. I went and bought all the Robert Service. And if you go with us next time to Alaska, let's take an afternoon and go to some of those upstairs over the shops bookstores, the antique bookstores, and look for first editions.
Okay. All right.
And
I
that's
will.
where
And since I talked to you,
that's where I found my first edition of him, because he's from Alaska. I mean, he's from the Yukon,
right.
But I mean, he writes about the Yukon. So
well,
yeah.
Since we talked a couple of weeks ago about this, I have found these.
Look at you.
I'm telling you,
I'm so jealous. First editions?
Several of them are. And I have this one. This is Ballads of a Chichaco. It's a first edition, and it's a leather bound. And this is from 1909.
Okay. Yep, that's his era.
He was a handsome guy too.
Yeah, he was. And he loved stomping around up there in the Yukon, and he wrote about firsthand, great poets write what they know, and great novelists write what they know. That's why they can't go home, because they wrote about the people they grew up with.
Right.
And so, but you have to write what you know. You can't write what you don't know. So people that try to imagine, and one of the poets that you and I will talk about at some point is Vachel Lindsay, and he tried to write about the Black experience, and he wasn't Black. So now I think if we look back at his poetry, we will say, well, this is a nice white guy trying to figure out how to write about a Black experience. And that piece has not, the Poems of the Congo has not lived, because he didn't write what he knew.
Wow. Okay. Well, That's very interesting to me. And so you are obviously a great English literature teacher, and you suggested some that I should read to
Yeah.
further my education. And I have, and some of these I really like. Some of them I kind of ambivalent about. Some of them I'm not sure I understand. And so
Good.
start me on something. What do you want to start with?
Well, let's start small.
Okay.
Let's pull a couple of the very small poems. The master of the small poem, of course, is Emily Dickinson. So let me see if I can pull her stuff out here. She wrote all small poems. She wrote little small poems.
She must have been
And
ADD, Gloria. She just couldn't pay attention.
she she grew up in a she never married. She was very reclusive. She didn't have much exposure, and so she observed tiny things about life. So this is, what I'm saying, right? What let's pick her. I heard a fly buzz when I died. Okay, when you are, let's say you're very sick. Let's say you've got COVID, and you are too sick to move, and you don't feel good, and you don't have any energy, and then one day you think, I think I feel better, and you get up and you're like, oh, I don't think I do feel better. I think I'll lie back down. Okay, you're dying. But she said, okay, that experience, what do you feel like? And so she said, you notice stuff you would never notice. Now you're the noticer.
Right.
So see if she's right. I heard a fly buzz when I died. The stillness in the room was like the stillness in the air between the heaves of storm. Okay. In between the heaves of storm, like, storms take a breath.
Right.
And then they start again.
Thunderclaps. Yeah.
Yeah. In between the wind, there'll be a little moment of silence. And if you've ever been in a tornado, the sky turns yellow first. And then there is the stillness. Everything is still. The trees are still. The grass is still. The wind is still. And then you hear this train coming. And everybody says it sounded like a train coming. Okay. So this is between the heaves of storm. Isn't that a great image?
That is, yeah.
The eyes around had wrung them dry. The breaths were gathering firm. For that last onset, when the king be witnessed in the room. Okay, the people sitting around the room, this person is dying. And they've cried their eyes out. And their breaths were gathering firm for that last onset. They're holding their breath for that last onset when the king, Jesus, comes in the room. It's between that next to last breath and the last breath. I willed my keepsake, signed away what portion of me be assignable, and then it was there interposed a fly. With blue, uncertain, stumbling buzz between the light and me, and then the windows failed, and then I could not see. So, you're dying and you're taking your last breath, and your senses are so finely designed, that last moment of breath when everybody says, Grandma woke up and she opened her eyes and she said, can you see them? Something happens, that last moment where you notice things you've never noticed. You want to be a noticer? Try dying.
Right. I just hope that I'm one of those that says, did you see them? Like, I hope I see angels and not a fly.
Yeah, that's what everybody says. I saw angels. But she says, I didn't see angels. I heard this fly buzz. And the fly, are iridescent. They're bluish iridescent.
Yeah.
If you take out a fly and look at, okay, so that's a noticer. You know what a fly looks like? Did you notice? Okay, she says he flew with blue, uncertain, stumbling buzz. Okay, his buzz was a color. The minute she heard him, she saw the iridescent blue that a fly is. You talk about sharpening your noticing.
Yeah. Yeah. And the stumbling, it's like they go.
Yeah. And she saw the blue of a fly. And then between the light and me, and then the windows failed. The light from the natural light coming in the window. She couldn't see no more. And then I could not see. And so that is between when you don't see, there's a moment when you cross the river, when it's between here and there and nobody can go with you. So the light of earth fails, and there's a moment when there's no light, and then there's that light. And that's the moment she's writing about. So that's a noticer of tiny things. And she wrote what she knew. You know, she had sat beside somebody dying, and she observed and listened to what that person was saying. So you like that?
Wow. I do. I love that. And I think I think if I had read it, I wouldn't have gotten it like you just explained it. But I think now maybe I can read one and see some of that.
Okay.
That's great.
Let's take this one.
Okay.
Let's pull out Carl Sandburg,
All right.
who his famous poem is the one Chicago.
Yeah,
we call him the
that.
muscle poet, you know, because he's big and brawny. He grew up near Chicago, and he was an urban kid. So he was poor. So his observance are urban observance. But listen to this one, and this is called Fog. And I love this poem, and I love New England, and we go to Nantucket, and we've gone there since the kids were, you know, tiny on the back of our bicycles.
Right.
And so I love weather. I love rain. I love storms. I love snow. I love wind. I love weather. I think no weather is boring. So you can have Florida. I love Florida for a week in February.
But you just think we don't have seasons.
Yeah. And if you do, they gently come and go and you don't notice.
No, we have summer season, we have hurricane season, you
have hurricane. That's a good one. I like that one.
We have fog a lot though.
But listen to what he calls fog. And I've thought of this image off and on my whole life. He says fog is. The fog comes on little cat feet.
Quietly.
It sneaks in. And suddenly you're looking at the expanse of ocean, and the sailboats are bobbing out there, and the sun is shining on the glistening waves, and you'll think, but then the fog rolls in, and little by little you can't see any of it. And if people said to you then, well, I don't understand your faith in God. I mean, look out there, there's nothing. And you would say, but I believe there is something. I just believe we can't see it yet. And so the fog blocks out everything. But he says the fog comes on little cat feet, quiet, sneaking in. It sits looking over harbor and city on silent haunches, like a cat. Think about a cat. Look at me. A little cat is on cat feet, and then he stops. And then on silent haunches, he moves on. And then the fog will lift, and the cat will go on his way. Okay, who would have ever thought of saying the fog is a cat? Is that interesting? That metaphor is so interesting. And every time I see fog, one of our family will say, the fog comes on little cat feet. Suzanne and Amy both were English majors, and Bill was an English major, and I was an English major. So we have all read a lot of the same literature. So we pull these little lines out. When you see it, and you're like, that image is perfect. Yes, the fog is a cat
It really is
sneaking in.
perfect. It really
Okay,
is
so let's
perfect.
hurry.
Now, I must say, my eighth grade English teacher was Mrs. McLeod, the African American lady, and she is the reason that I'm a writer, I guess, or if I am, but
If
she,
you are you kidding me?
well, she is the one who encouraged me, but she also made us memorize poems, and this sounds like a poem that I would have chosen because it's short. It's like when you memorize a Bible verse. Okay, Jesus wept. This is the Jesus wept of poetry, I think. It's very short,
Yeah.
but she
Yeah.
she she wouldn't have given an A for memorizing this. But I love the visualization of that. And now I guess I won't see fog and think of anything but that.
No, you don't. I mean, and that's what poets do. They give you an image that you say, and that's why everybody they've come up to me over the years and said, I could have written that. That's my experience. I could have written that. But of course they couldn't have,
Right.
or they would have. But what a poet does is give words to your deepest feelings that you can't name. I can't name it. But I love fog. I love weather. So when I hear Carl Sandburg say, the fog is a kitten, I was like, of course it is. Yes. It's furry like that too.
Yeah.
And it sneaks in on little cat feet. Yeah.
You know, it,
Okay, let's look at another Sandburg poem while we're at it.
okay.
Um, he's got one about, it's called Grass.
Oh, yeah, yeah. You had me read that one. That one is,
And we will see this. You will see it. We travel all over the world. You do too. You will see. Let's just take. Okay, let's just take the derailment of the train this last week in Ohio, and that disaster and what it did to the ground and the soil, and they're digging up the soil with big steam shovels to dump it someplace else, and then what's that going to do to the water under that, the groundwater? Okay, so anyway, he writes this poem about grass, and you will think of this many times in your life. Pile the bodies high at Austerlitz and Waterloo. Okay, you tell me about that line. What are those?
war sites.
Right. Which wars?
Um, well, Waterloo was the Napoleonic conquest.
Right.
Austerlitz, I'm
Absolutely.
not sure.
Well, it's Hitler's conquering of Germany and killing the Jews and capturing them, and putting them in railroad cars,
I've
and
never heard that term. Austerlitz?
it's just a site of one of his battles, of one of the European battles.
Oh, okay. All right.
Okay, so let's just take any war or any accident or any tragedy. Let's take the tornado that tore through the Midwest, and you remember the guy that was playing the piano in
Right.
what was left of his house? Okay, just think of that tornado or whatever tragedy you can think of. But these are dead bodies.
Yeah.
These two left dead bodies. So the next line is, shovel them under and let me work. I am the grass. I cover all. And pile them high at Gettysburg. Pile them high at, I'm not sure to pronounce it, Ypres and Verdun. Shovel
Verdun.
them under and
Yeah.
let me work. 2 years, 10 years. And passengers ask the conductor, you're going by in your train, what place is this? Where are we now? I am the grass. Let me work.
Wow. If you've ever been to Gettysburg, it's like I've seen battlefields before, and they're usually like, I don't know, 10 or 20 football fields put together, but Gettysburg is just it's a couple of miles of fields and fence rows, and we had more casualties at that one battle at Gettysburg than we had in the entire Vietnam War.
Yeah. Okay.
And so you
So
talk about piling those bodies.
yes, and those were when you're fighting hand to hand, you're cutting people's throats, you're slicing off their arms, you're stabbing them in the gut. You know, guys are going face to face. They're shooting them in the face with guns, and these young boys are lying everywhere, bodies and blood as far as you can see. And Bill's doing a restudy now of Abraham Lincoln, and he was at Gettysburg right after all that. There was still blood. There was still no grass, and but the grass, and this is like nature. Let's go back to Adam and Eve when they said, okay, they had sinned and they had violated their covenant with God, and they realized they were naked. They took a fig leaf, something God had made in nature, and it was probably immense then. I don't know what fig leaves look like, but it was big enough to cover their genitals. And this is also the grass. Let me work. I will cover that up. And I fast forward to that wonderful painting, or it's actually a wood print, a wood carving of Jesus going into hell to grab people from hell. And two of the people he grabs is Adam and Eve. And he's reaching for somebody else. Who is that? Judas? Is it me? Is it? Who is it? I think grace is so much bigger than we can ever imagine. And we sing all the time the love of God, and we don't even clue what that means. The love of God, the guilty pair bowed down with care. God sent his son to win. His erring child, he reconciled and pardoned from his sin. The erring child is Adam and Eve, the guilty pair. Okay, so we sing that all the time, and people love to send people to hell, but not many people get excited about pulling them out of hell. And that's what Jesus came to do. And everything he creates does that. Everything he creates is redemptive. So thus, grass.
The grass.
Give me time. Give me time. I'll cover all your wounds. And it will be like a fertile valley. It's a valley of dead bones.
Wow. Good grief. Whew.
So how can...
Okay, so fog and grass, I'll not look at them the same.
No. Let's pull Robert Frost. He's good at exactly what because I wanted this program to be about, you have written so much about the noticer. And your passion, your heart passion, I read everything you write, is to make people notice. Don't miss it. Notice what's going on. Notice the people.
Well, you're doing that with me today. So Robert
Frost is just a genius at that. Now, Carl Sandburg, I call him the muscle, the poet with muscle. He's the, and I know I'd like to talk to another one about him later on when we continue this conversation. Okay. But this one is often quoted, but not often paid close attention to. So everybody will know this poem, hopefully. But it's called The Road Not Taken. Frost writes about stuff. You can take it on any level. If you just want to talk about, we have a cabin in the woods, and the cabin in the woods looks exactly like The Road Not Taken. If you come out of the cabin, then the one road goes around which used to be a gravel pit, and the other roads go the other way around. But when the sun shines, you can see those roads diverge. And it shines on it like sunshine in the morning. And I always envision that. And that's what Frost saw. And you've seen it. You've gone to a woods and seen a path, and you look like, okay, I wonder which one we should take. And then you say, well, this has been worn more. Maybe this goes to where there's a destination. The other, however, if you're adventuresome, you say, this one doesn't have much wear, but something, when it was a deer that made this path. Why did they go off into the woods on this path? So my curiosity says, I want to see where that one went, So that's what Frost is saying. And you can take this at just that level if you want to. Or, yeah. Two roads diverged in a yellow wood, and sorry I could not travel both and be one traveler. Long I stood and looked down one as far as I could to where it bent in the undergrowth, then took the other as just as fair and having perhaps the better claim because it was grassy and wanted wear. As though for that the passing there had worn them really about the same. And both that morning equally lay in leaves no step had trodden black. Nobody'd been there this morning. Oh, I kept the first for another day, yet knowing how way leads on to way, I doubted if I should ever come back. I shall be telling this with a sigh, somewhere ages and ages hence. Two roads diverged in a wood, and I took the one less traveled by. And that has made all the difference.
I see how you could take that other ways.
So honestly, this is all of our biographies, no matter which path we took. I love the thing that said nobody had walked that path this morning. So you have a chance to be the first footprint on a path. So nobody's making you go there. The crowd has gone this way or that way, but they're not making you choose. Nobody's walked there this morning. Of your own volition, you either took the road more traveled or the road less traveled. And every one of us can look back at our lives and say, I took the road everybody went on, and I wish I hadn't. Or I took the road less traveled, which made me go a lonely journey into the woods. But oh, thank God. Thank God I did.
Or you could take it like a guy is deciding who to marry. And there's two girls, and one's a harlot and one's a virgin. And he took the one less traveled by.
Yeah.
Or they just made all the difference.
Or one may just be popular. She may be the cheerleader or the majorette in the band or thing. But you looked farther and you saw this girl who was not that popular, but she was deep and thoughtful, and her beauty came from inside somewhere. And wise you are, Andy. You chose that girl.
Well, actually, I chose the one in the middle because she was beautiful and deep and wise. So,
absolutely.
But it is amazing how you can apply this to every life. You said this is all our stories.
Right.
Hey, because we're doing a podcast now, and then we're going to move on. We're going to end the podcast, and then we're going to allow people to join some of the other conversations because we're going to keep talking, and we're going to put them as episodes on Wisdom Harbor. But before we stop the podcast, I wanted this one that you turned me on to by James Weldon Johnson, that you said, listen to Whitney Phipps deliver this.
Right.
And you guys had a television special that Whitney Phipps was a guest on, and you had him deliver this. And so before we play that, just give us the background of this.
Well, first of all, in the time we have, I can't tell you everything James Weldon Johnson did. He also was a jazzer, and he was a songwriter, and he was a big motivator after. In the early, he wrote God's Trombones, I think, in 1927 when we looked it up. But he was now saying, okay, the slaves have been free now for about 100 years. Now what? And he was a big crusader for the now what.
He was a contemporary of Booker T. Washington and George Washington Carver.
Well, and he was very articulate, as you can tell. And he was put all that aside, which you can't because of his life being so rich and so broad and his influence so incredible. Just put all that aside, he is one of the major American poets. I mean, there's nobody, and he puts things, he could preach too, as you know. He's a Martin Luther King that can say things like nobody can say them. So I want to say that, but one of his poems is about the creation, and he sets it, and it's amazing. We'll come back to that. But this one is about this old saint, this old Black saint dying. She's in pain, and she's been in pain for a long time. So he is describing, okay, you just read Emily Dickinson describing those moments of dying. But let's look at the other side. What is God saying to his angels about this old Black lady dying? And God is saying, okay, she's had enough. She's had enough. Go down, death. Go down and get Sister Caroline. It's time. So this is the poem. So we'll listen to Whitley say.
This blew me away. This gave me chills. This is Whitney Phipps doing Go Down, Death, written by James Weldon Johnson.
She is not dead. She is resting in the bosom of Jesus. Heartbroken husband, weep no more. Grief-stricken son, weep no more. She only just gone on. Day before yesterday morning, God was looking down from his great high heaven, looking down on all his children, and his eye fell on Sister Caroline, tossing on her bed of pain. And God's big heart was touched with pity, with everlasting pity. And God sat back on his throne, and he commanded that tall, bright angel standing at his right hand, "Call me death." And that tall, bright angel cried in a voice like a clap of thunder, "Call death! Call death!" And the echo sounded down the streets of heaven till it reached away back to that shadowy place where death waits with his pale white horses. And death heard the summons, and he leaped on his fastest horse, pale as a sheet in the moonlight. Up the golden street death galloped, and the hooves of his horses struck fire from the goal, but they didn't make no sound. Up death rode to the great white throne and waited for God's command. And God said, "Go down, death. Go down, down in Yamacraw, and find Sister Caroline. She's borne the burden in the heat of the day. She's labored long in my vineyard, and she's tired, she's weary. Go down, death, and bring her to me." And death didn't say a word, but he loosened the reins on his pale white horse, and he clamped the spurs to his bloodless sides, and out and down he rode through heaven's pearly gates, past suns and moons and stars. On death road, leaving the lightning flash behind, straight down he came. And while we were watching round her bed, she turned her eyes and looked away. She saw what we couldn't see. She saw old death. She saw old death coming like a falling star, but death didn't frighten Sister Caroline. He looked to her like a welcome friend, and she whispered to us, "I'm going on," and she smiled and closed her eyes, and death took her up like a baby, and she lay in his icy arms, but she didn't feel no chill. And death began to ride again, up beyond the evening star, into the glittering light of glory, onto the great white throne, and there he laid Sister Caroline on the loving breast of Jesus. And Jesus took his own hand and wiped away her tears, and he smoothed the furrows from her face, and the angels sang a little song, and Jesus rocked her in his arms and kept a saying, "Take your rest, take your rest, weep not, weep not. She is not dead, she is asleep. She is resting in the bosom of Jesus."
That is amazing. But I've got to say, Whitney Phipps could probably say the alphabet and I would get chills.
Well, he has got the voice of God to start with.
He does.
He does. And he is in that experience, in that God has put him in many a room, I have a feeling, where some person was dying.
Right.
And his deep faith also realizes that God is such a God of mercy, and death is not to be feared. In most cases, death is welcome. And people that die natural deaths, you die it in pieces like you give birth in pieces. There are labor pains to dying, and there are labor pains to giving birth. And I think I've sat beside somebody dying. I've sat beside all of four of our parents dying, and I've sat beside all two of my girls and my daughters-in-law giving birth. And I got to tell you, the experience of those flaps that dogs you put for dogs that are made out of that heavy plastic so they can go in and out of the garage in cold weather,
right.
By themselves and get their food. I think I'm sitting beside such a flap in eternity. And when you watch your daughter or daughter-in-law giving birth, and you're grabbing this little hand that is just lately come from God, that flap opens a little bit, and the angel dust of eternity gets on you, and you're never the same. If you have watched somebody give birth and that live little creature coming out of there, and then he takes his first breath and he's just, wah, and it's such a welcome sound. He's breathing and he's new and he's fresh and he's lately come from God. As Wordsworth, that's another great poet, said, so lately come from God. Okay, you get that same angel dust on you when you're handing off a hand into eternity. And for a minute, they're here and you know them and you got their whole life and you were grieving and you're watching a fly buzz,
Right.
Those intense moments. And then the flap opens, and a little of the angel dust from eternity comes as that person goes into eternity instead of coming from eternity. And the two experiences will change you unless you're just aboard. You're just never the same. Never the same.
Well, thank you for being here with us. And before we go, I have one that I want to read.
Okay.
But I've got to ask you about this because I chose one that I knew that you had written. And you know how much I love you, but I am also very curious about you. That's why I love talking to you. I love asking you questions. I love hearing you talk. And every songwriter that that I know has written the words and then the tune, or they've written the words with the tune. But there is music that is, it's not new music, it's called Finlandia.
Mm-hmm. Sibelius.
When was that written?
Um, it was in wartime, and I can't tell you the date. I looked it up recently. But this tune is haunting, and I've always wanted to write something to it. And I do. By the way, Bill and I work pretty much opposite. We start with the idea, and the idea provokes the music, and often then I write with the idea in place. I then write to the tune, to the melody that Bill is developing, usually the chorus first, and then I say, where are you going to go with that? And he does the musical where he's going to go with that, verse wise, the main part of the song.
Right.
And so that's how we work. This one was long written before I came around. So but I've always wanted to write to it. And this lyric, I guess this lyric is my own spiritual pilgrimage. I say it was easier to write than it was to live because it is my living out through my life these pieces that are in there. So how far am I along that journey? And probably you can judge that better than I can. But yeah.
Well, I want to read these words. This is just, and also in the show notes, I'm going to put a link to Bill and the vocal band and some guys singing this. And so definitely click on that link and listen to these words with the music. But here are the words Gloria wrote. I then shall live as one who's been forgiven. I'll walk with joy to know my debts are paid. I know my name is clear before my Father. I am his child, and I am not afraid. So greatly pardoned, I'll forgive my brother. The law of love I gladly will obey. I then shall live as one who's learned compassion. I've been so loved that I'll risk loving too. I know how fear builds walls instead of bridges. I'll dare to see another point of view. And when relationship demands commitment, then I'll be there to care and follow through. Your kingdom come around and through and in me. Your power and glory, let them shine through me. Your hallowed name, oh, may I bear with honor, and may your living kingdom come in me. The bread of life, oh, may I share with honor, and may you feed a hungry world through me. Amen, amen, amen. That is as many times as I've heard that, Gloria, and as many times as I've read it, I don't even know how. I mean, to say that that is a genius piece of writing is to leave God out of the equation, which I know you don't do. But God has put in you the ability to see things and to communicate them in a way that no one else can do. And I appreciate your life. I appreciate your mentorship. I appreciate your friendship. And I appreciate your time with us today.
Thank you. It's been fun. I'll do this all day if you want.
Well, we're going to do it some more. And if you have enjoyed this conversation, you need to be a part of wisdomharbor.com. And we're going to be releasing on the Writer's Dock, we'll be releasing conversations with Gloria and me, mostly with Gloria, but it'll be these conversations digging into some of this stuff that I thought I didn't like. And so thank you for bringing me to this table, Gloria. Thank you so much.
Thank you. It was fun.
I'm Andy Andrews, the professional noticer, harnessing common sense and wisdom to plow through challenges all the way to an answer for you. And I think that'll do it for this week. Get us out of here, Matthew. So, ladies and gentlemen, and to the boys and girls who aspire to become ladies and gentlemen, we have reached the end of another episode of The Professional Noticer. In a world where common sense has become a superpower, I'm harnessing that tiny bit of mental energy I have for you, seeking wisdom, making observations, and endeavoring to answer tough questions in a way that will empower your family and your business. I'm Andy Andrews. Until next week, goodbye. This episode of The Professional Noticer was produced by Matt Limpert. The Noticer theme written and performed by Sugarcane Jane. Homecoming videos for the cast and crew provided by Twinkle and Smoke of Beverly Hills. Additional financial consideration provided by poetanddontknowit.com. Have you ever considered a career in the arts? What's that? You say you can't sing or dance? Well, if that's your stance, then take a quick glance at how taking a chance might help you enhance the very expanse of your current circumstance. At poetanddontknowit.com, we help bring along your hidden abilities all the way to the surface. For instance, your ability to rhyme words, and there's a mighty fine living to be made in America these days as a poet. For only $89.95 per year, poetanddontknowit.com will bring out your natural abilities by way of online classes and workshops. You'll learn how to write a limerick, how to create parodies of the classics, basic rhyming techniques, and heck, Poet and Don't Know It will even help you learn to create that most admired poetry of all, the kind that doesn't rhyme. So don't blow it. You have talent, so grow it. Then you can show it. Don't think you can stow it. To no one but yourself, you owe it. Get poetanddontknowit.com.